Hello and welcome to BharatShakti.in. I'm Nitin Gokhale. Exactly a year ago, India lost its first Chief of Defence Staff, Gen Bipin Rawat, his wife and 11 others in a tragic helicopter crash near Wellington in Tamil Nadu. That blow to the Indian military was a big one, and from which it seemed the Indian military and its leadership will take some time to recover. On this special edition of the program, I have with me Lt Gen Subrata Saha, who was not only Indian Army's Deputy Chief, but also a coursemate and a close friend of Gen Bipin Rawat. And today we thought, on the first anniversary of that event, we must recall Gen Rawat's legacy, his personality and his contribution to the Indian military. General Saha, welcome to this program and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's first talk about Gen Bipin Rawat as a person. I mean, you were together from NDA days, I guess, and sort of grew up in the ranks, became senior officers. So what are your very prominent memories about Gen Rawat?
You know, Nitin, in your opening remarks, you spoke about a great blow to the military. So one, of course, it was a huge national loss, and at a personal level, I think I lost a very dear friend. In fact, it's so hard to reconcile even now, 1 year, hence, that such a thing could happen. You still get a sense he's around. Okay, so such was the presence of the person, and as you mentioned, we have been postmates from NDA. He had joined NDA 6 months before us, but because of some medical reasons, he came down and joined our course, eventually passed out. He's sword of honor of our course, and we are all so proud of him. And I think he's amongst those few sword of honors who, rose to become the army chief and the first chief of defense staff of the army.
Yeah, because just for the viewers' benefit, sword of honor cadets normally have not risen to become, very rarely have risen to become chiefs of their respective services. That's what you were trying to
Exactly. So that, I think you said, what would you remember of him as a person? It speaks of the huge stamina, usually one would attribute the point that you were bringing out to early burnout. But here was a person who had that kind of stamina, and even till the last day when I met him here, which was not very long before the unfortunate 8th of December last year, he was all the time rearing to go, like he always was bubbling with ideas, wanted to bounce them off, see what can be done to make things better. I mean, of course, everybody in the country talks about, his being the first CDS and undertaking all those, major reforms that were expected of him to be executed. But I should also bring out the fact that, how gradually, right from the time he became the army chief, I think he had his agenda set the moment he came in as vice chief. And if you see the kind of changes he was trying to make for the JCUs OR, they are not too publicized, but I think he did a huge deal over there, in terms of the cadre review and all. And I must share with you, soon after his unfortunate demise, I had gone to one of the units. It was not a Gurkha unit, it was not 11 GR. And the Subedar Major of that unit told me, "Sahab, jis din ye hua, hamare jawano langar mein khana nahi khaya."
Exactly.
So that is the kind
of emotions he
respect he carried and reverence he carried, and he was, all the time, as I said, on the roll, wanting to do something new, absolutely open to ideas, pick them up. Okay, and in many ways, because he was a reformer by nature, so I'm not surprised at all that he would attract controversy. But he is the last person who would ever get, shaken by controversy or anything like this. I recall one of your media, courses that you used to run all over. I recollect I was commander, higher command, and you had come for the higher command students. I remember one of the principles you gave to the students was, please start, having a little thick skin.
Which I think Bipin Rawat did develop for his own and the military's
Exactly,
benefit.
and
Yes.
I recall having told you that, look, Bipin, Nitin, I am from Assam regiment, so rhino
Rhino
is a thick
skin.
skin. But here was Bipin who would very much be like a rhino, thick skin and ready to.
And bulldozing people
Exactly,
were required.
exactly.
You spoke about the JCOs and the ORs. I remember very distinctly. He was launching my book on the security and national security during the Modi government's first tenure in Pune. And there he announced that decision that we are going to do a cadre review. This was in December, I think 2017, if I remember correctly. He was already chief for a year and he was doing that. And like you said, he was a man in a hurry. I also recall, like you said, people were affected even round the ranks. I was in Bareilly for the what do you call the junior leadership,
Junior leadership,
where the JCOs and the NCOs are trained, and I was speaking to them during tea. So they all said, "Sir, you knew General Rawat, and really, we miss him the way this has happened." And this was exactly 2 months after, less than a month after the accident, unfortunate accident. So I completely agree with you on that. But as a military man, purely as a professional appraisal, if you have to do. You said he was a man in a hurry, but he had ideas and he wanted to drag, I think, the Indian Army especially into the more modern kind of a functioning rather than rest on the laurels that had happened earlier. Was that the correct assessment?
Absolutely. Nitin, you are perhaps aware, sorry, I'm personalizing the answer.
Sure, please do.
You're asking me the question,
Yes.
so therefore,
Yes.
if you recall, I was on that, a massive drive for indigenization.
Absolutely. You were the deputy chief that time and you started that Make in India.
Make in India, win India's war with Indian
Absolutely.
solutions.
Yes.
And almost every weekend we were going out, reaching out to all academic and industry hubs.
Absolutely.
So moment General Rawat came in as the vice chief and when I told him about what we were doing, he was completely excited,
Right.
In any case, he had come from Southern Command.
Right.
So I was keeping him apprised of all the movements that we were doing in his area of responsibility. So that time, of course, it was just for information. But the moment he came here as vice chief, I mean, A, he was excited. B, he said, look, this is the way to go. And after he became the vice chief, I can actually tell you the number of MOUs that we signed with IITs. And, we were able to post army officers to IIT Gandhinagar, IIT Bombay, IIT Madras. Because that was the desire, that unless and until we get the future technologies into our, into our scheme of things. How can we ever modernize? So that definitely he was there, and I remember even just about 3 days before I retired, I was telling him that, look, I am ready with my next volume of Compendium of Problem Statements. And he says, I want to, release it before you retire.
Oh, yes.
I recollect in an evening function we had done it. So why I illustrate these 2 points is to highlight that he was all the time, out to see how we can modernize. And again, in his concept of modernization, it was not only about weapons and equipment. It is about training the manpower.
The mindset also had to change.
To feel modernized. And again, I will highlight here, he would tell me that, okay, what all can we do to, bring up the so-called earlier we used to call it technical threshold.
Right.
What can we do to bring up the technological threshold of the JCOs?
Right.
So after that, if you see, a lot of instructions went out for introducing technological subjects virtually in every curriculum. Like if a fellow was doing, let's say, the machine guns course, the latest technologies of machine gun was being taught to every rank whosoever was doing the course. So that's what I'm trying to say, that because of his drive, because of his nature, if a change, if a reform was required, he was ready to look at that reform on a much wider scale, rather than just a focus here and a focus there. No, he was very much area oriented in his outlook.
That's true. But one of the other attributes that I found, we had very close interaction, as you are aware, not just when he became Southern Army Commander or Vice Chief or Chief or CDS, but even before that in 3 Corps, and before that when he was in Wallong. I was in Guwahati. I had met him first in Wallong when he was commanding his battalion there. But every time I noticed one thing is that he was willing to take the flak for the right thing that he thought was doing. And I think through his tenure in the Army headquarters, first as the chief and then the CDS, I think he got a lot of flak. rightly or wrongly, but he never let it interfere in his decision making. Is that something also you noticed?
Nitin, you are quoting an example when he was Army Chief and CDS. Bipin got posted as Colonel MS3, dealing with NCC deputation and all that. And I was already there as Colonel MS2, MS, that is dealing with infantry officers.
Right.
The amount of flack that you take in the MS branch.
Right.
I guess you know.
That's where you do postings and promotions.
Exactly, posting, promotions and all, like the personal branch. The maximum flack you get over there. And many people would get quite taken in, but he wasn't really bothered. But then, if it came to a genuine case, mind you, this person could go to any extents to see that the case goes through. So taking flack was never an issue with him as long as the intent was genuine, intent was good and the requirement was genuine.
Yeah, so I think that's why he gelled with the late Manohar Parrikar, because he also had the same attitude, where he said that if I don't have malified intentions and if I take a decision which is unconventional or different, then I should be able to take the flack. So that was one good combination which didn't last too long, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately.
But now let me come to the more professional domains of this. Let's look at his legacy, or what could we do to pay a good tribute to him in the military, in the government. So national defense reforms are sort of a halfway house right now. They have not yet complete. They have not been initiated in some cases. So how would you think the Indian military or the Indian national leadership must take this forward?
Well, if you permit, Nitin, I would like to put in a little correction here. See, any reform of that magnitude to an armed forces of this size and rather manpower-oriented armed forces, because of whatever circumstances, it just as well that it happens a little slowly and deliberately.
Sure.
So I don't think we should feel upset about being halfway or things like that.
Yes.
Okay, and also the fact that there was a massive void for 7-8 months from the demise of Gen Rawat to Gen Chauhan taking over.
Yes.
And I'm sure in his own steady ways, Gen Chauhan is going to take it forward.
That's right.
And since you asked what would be the greatest tribute, I think the first integrated command will be the greatest tribute to Gen Bipin Rawat for having, put it into motion. And as we were talking about flack, I mean, all kinds of headwinds, hurdles, he was able to, get people to come along and see. And I used to meet him very often because of the fact I was member of the National Security Advisory Board then, and I used to come and meet him almost once in a month, sometimes more than once, just updating him on what deliberations we were having, getting his thoughts on what studies, exercises we can take on from that side. So I was quite aware of how he was going about. Maybe sometimes in his public speeches he would state something, but that having been stated, invariably he was the first one to get across to the concerned service chief, the vice chiefs, their chief of operations, DGMO equivalent, sit down with them, and he didn't mind spending hours, throwing the idea back and forth, and he was quite happy to accept the other person's point of view as long as they were ready to move ahead. So I think it was a very deliberate process. Yes, occasionally misstated, I think, and perhaps again further misinterpreted. So therefore, it was never as if he was, Akla Cholo. It was not an Akla Cholo case. He was very much taking everybody along in taking it forward. So as I look at it, it is only a matter of time when we'll see this happening. Yeah, no doubt sometimes a push is required from the top.
Yes.
Because if the groundswell is not moving it up, the push is required.
So the top-driven process is important.
You've been speaking to almost all, military, professional military education courses.
Yes.
Everywhere you go, don't you get the same feedback? Everybody wants the integration. So if there are these little hiccups here and there, primarily, let's be honest, on turf matters, sometimes on technical matters, these have to be ironed and it has to be gone through. So
no, they have to be rammed through.
Exactly.
I mean, that's true. No, I agree with you.
If the ironing requires ramping, so be it.
Yeah, no, I agree that change is very much in the air, and people also desire it. I mean, that of course I can tell you from right from staff college to NDC, everyone keeps asking when is it going to happen, what is the next step. That certainly is there. Now let's move a little bit wider perspective on what we are seeing in Russia and Ukraine, and the whole idea that has now been turned on its head. When Azerbaijan-Armenia war happened, then everybody said, "Oh, this is the way." The swift wars, dependent on standoff weapons, UAVs, armed UAVs. But now we are seeing this for the last 10 months almost. So how does Indian military, not just the army, prepare for this multi-domain future war, generation war in the context of the integration that is being planned? How do you do that?
Okay, so let me tell you one thing, that I think Indian Army in particular, and of course Air Force very much alongside, is most exposed to multiple domains of war.
Right.
I mean, grey zone warfare has come into the lexicon only in 2013.
Correct.
Unrestricted warfare came into the lexicon in much after the first Gulf War.
Absolutely.
Okay, but the fact of the matter is, other domains of warfare, sub-conventional warfare, haven't we been facing it virtually since our independence?
Since 1956 at least, if not more.
Why
earlier.
56,
47, 48.
Exactly.
Yes, of course.
47, 48.
47, 48.
When the conventional war was, offensive was refused by General Gracie,
Right.
those two brigade-sized offensive from Jammu, Sialkot, Jammu and Muzaffarabad, Srinagar,
Exactly.
what did they do? They switched immediately to
That's
that.
right,
So,
yeah.
to that extent, there is a systemic, shall we say, resilience which is already built into the system. So therefore, we are prepared for it. Having said that, I think what the Indian Army has to really focus is how to bring in more technology. And when I say more technology, it is absolutely fundamental now to understand the convergence of cyber, space, and electronic warfare.
Right.
Because these three are becoming the key determinants of any future war. Because the efficacy of no matter what a brilliant weapon system you may have, say the HIMARS or whatever, ultimately if you are not dominant in these three, you will see that you are not able to effectively use the rest of the equipment. So therefore, I think it is important that we start focusing very heavily on our capability in terms of ISR from the space, in terms of cyber, in terms of electronic warfare, and I think that's important. In terms of capability, I think the government has taken a brilliant initiative of trying to push this semiconductors
Initiative
chip
there,
manufacturing
yes.
in the country with all the PLI, which is their production linked initiatives and all.
Sure.
It is very, very important to push that. Of course, even the new drone policy, which the government is trying to put out with all kinds of incentives like PLI and all, these are good signs, and we
Yes.
have to see how we want to take all this forward. They have modernized our DAP, the
Acquisition
DAP
procedure.
2020
That's
acquisition, defense acquisition procedure. That needs still further modernization.
It needs quicker turnaround, I think.
And as far as the armed forces are concerned, I think they have to become much more liberal with the army commanders' special financial powers. They cannot tie it to the knots of the DAP. It has to move a lot faster. And again, since we are here discussing Gen Bipin Rawat, I mean, he was all the time insistent on, okay, how can we find a simplest solution to this?
So many
procurement
steps to
hurdles.
take for acquisition. Why don't you reduce them?
So therefore, I think it is very important, because otherwise, we'll always be behind the cycle.
Right.
By the time the procurement matures, it's already behind. So better that most of this modernizing, I'm not talking about space,
Cyber or
I'm talking more about these drones and all. They must all go down decentralized to command core level procurements at
Yes.
a much faster pace, keeping pace with the technology. There are a lot of youngsters today who are doing good job. That said, but as a country, like we have gone in for semiconductor, if our drone requirements are what they are, it's phenomenal. If you go by a FICCI report, it talks about some $11 billion by 2025. If that is the kind of market size, then why are we not investing in PCBs? Why are we not investing in batteries?
Right.
Semiconductor chips we have spoken about.
Yes.
So it's very, and those propellers.
Absolutely.
We are having to import all of that. You talk to any of the youngsters who are working in this drone space, their biggest hassle is to keep importing.
Yes.
Integrating it here is not a big challenge.
Correct.
It is the import which is a much bigger challenge, than anything else. So a lot of areas we have to really work
absolutely.
to be able to keep pace with the way the wars are being fought today and the way our adversaries are preparing, really speaking.
Exactly. I think the final point, and I want your sort of assessment on that. one of the key areas that General Rawat was trying to do was to, like you also mentioned right at the beginning, integrated theatre commands. Now, there could be differences of opinion in the three services, but that it is imperative to have theatre command, jointness, and sort of unity of purpose, if I may use that term, for prosecuting a war or a conflict. Where are we in that domain, and how was General Rawat sold on that idea? Because generally it is believed that the Air Force is against it, but I also found earlier, but now things are changing, that some of the older veterans really were saying that you can't do that, you must have boots on the ground, you can't reduce. But I think modern warfare requires more technology and a balance between manpower and technology. Is that the way forward?
We were just talking about space.
Yes.
We were talking about cyber. Can you imagine three services managing space differently? Can you imagine three services dealing with cyber attacks differently? There is no way. Okay, look at the logistics demands. If you see, why did Russia get so stressed out? Why did they have to pull out of Kherson, for example, recently? It is because of the pressures of the supply chain.
Absolutely.
Right in the beginning, when they were almost about to reach Kyiv, that 640 odd,
long queue that they had. Yeah.
Why did it get stuck? It got stuck because of logistics. So in these circumstances, with our kind of terrain, can we keep the three services separate anymore? No.
You answered it.
So, I mean, it is a necessity. Just as well that there are differences of opinion, because after all, these differences of opinion are because of perceived problems.
Sure.
So if you deal with those differences of opinion, actually you are dealing with those perceived problems, which is good for the future. And in doing so, like you were saying a little while back, if it needs a little push, so be it. I mean, it has to be done.
I remember that because when he was appointed CDS, and one of the first meetings, I was telling him an anecdote with Manohar Parrikar. Manohar Parrikar had come back from his first trip to US, and he brought back a book called Victory on the Potomac, which spoke about how the Goldwater-Nichols Act was implemented in the US and how much of resistance there was. So it's not as if it's unique to India. And I think I said that, why don't you take a look at this book? If you want, a summary is available. He said, I have already read the summary, but I would certainly read the book. So he was that kind of a man who was keeping in step with the times. So that's my memory about it.
I did the US War College in 2010.
Correct.
Which is 14 plus 10, 24 years after Goldwater-Nichols Act.
That's right.
Let me tell you, that time was a difference. And everybody was fresh from either their experience in Afghanistan or Iraq.
Right.
Despite that, despite the differences, it is the fundamental, acceptance that it is a necessity. Was never in denial. Everybody said so, but there were problems which were still getting sorted 24 years hence. So it is okay. It is part of the process.
That's true. So I think the greatest tribute to General Rawat, as you as his coursemate and friend, me as a professional interlocutor, later a friend, actually would be to make the Indian military modern, forward-looking and ready for the future generation war. I think that's what we can actually hope for.
Exactly.
Isn't it?
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Saha, for your time and your memories of General Rawat. Thank you.